Teenage girls can be so hard to deal with. I know I was a nightmare when I was a teenager, and my little girl, who is now a toddler, I know that she is going to be very, very opinionated when she reaches her teens. But maybe the most difficult teenager to deal with was Saint Catherine of Siena. Now, she was born in 1347, and she decided very, very young that she was going to be a nun. Now, I know that this could sound like something not particularly rebellious, but it was rebellious for her. Now, she belonged to a family which was quite well off. They weren't like really rich, they weren't a noble family, but they were a merchant's family in a city which was ruled by merchants. So they definitely had everything that they needed. And that's good because they were a very, very numerous family. Saint Catherine was one of 25 brothers and sisters, okay? Her mother had 25 kids, right? They didn't all survive. In fact, Catherine was a twin, only that her twin didn't survive, okay? So her parents wanted her to marry off. Now, during the Middle Ages, that happens pretty early. So when you're, a young teenager, that's when you kind of start preparing for that. And they told her, start preparing to get married, start, looking nice, leaving your hair down, letting your hair long, because that was how you showed that you were unmarried, basically, leaving your hair like not tied up or up in any kind of hairdo. And she was like not having it. At a very young age, she knew she wanted to become a nun. She used to live just down the road from a very, very big church in Siena where she was born, which was the Church of St. Dominic. So that was the church that she wanted to enter. She knew she wanted to be one of the nuns in that particular church. And when she was young, she also kind of fantasized on being like Saint Jerome, which had been a monk who had lived as a hermit for a long time. So she kind of, when other kids were playing like with dolls, she would pretend to be a hermit living in the desert, okay? Now, so her parents say, you're going to get married, and she's like, no, I'm going to become a nun. And her parents like, no girl, we can't afford the dowry that you need to enter that particular order. Because if you became a nun, your parents still had to pay a form of dowry, which would be paid to the church, okay? And they were like, it's 25 of yous, all right? I'm not paying a dowry more expensive for you than the rest of your sisters. They weren't all sisters. I don't remember how many sisters they were. But anyway, a lot of dowries to pay out. So they were like, you can get married like all the rest of your sisters. And she got really, really angry, and she said, no, I am most certainly going to become a nun. She stopped eating. She basically threw a massive strop until they allowed her to become part of this monastic order. Now, just to be clear, even the ladies of the monastic order didn't want her to be a nun among their order, because this was a very specific order, which was more for like ladies of a certain age, more mature ladies that had a higher education. And I mean, she did not have an education. She couldn't read or write. So it was not really the order for her, but she was not having it. She was going to become part of that Dominican order, okay? So she became part of it. And then she was like, however, the nun life ain't for me. No, I'm going to be spending time outside. I'm going to get myself known, and I'm going to be spending time with the poor and also with people, and just doing a lot of things that kind of got her name on the books, okay? So she was actually performing exorcisms, for example. She was falling into these kinds of like fits where she wouldn't be able, like, she would have to be helped by the people that were with her. And thankfully, she ended up having quite a following, because during these fits, she would need that following to take care of her. During these fits, she would have visions in which she would see all kinds of saints, talk with Mary, talk with Jesus. During one of these fits, she even got married to Jesus, okay? He put a ring on her finger. More about that ring on another episode, which is going to be, low-key gross, and we're going to be going more into detail about what that ring actually is. So, subscribe if you want to know what that ring entailed. However, so she gets married to Jesus Christ. She does all kinds of things during these fits. Now, if you're living during the Middle Ages and you start having visions and, talking about what God told me, things can go one or two ways, all right? And it might not go very well for you. It could go well, or it could go Joan of Arc kind of way, So the Catholic Church sends a bunch of men, obviously, to inspect her. These men are led by Romualdo da Capua, a very educated clergyman, who go to talk with her and to see, like, what's this girl about, okay? Luckily for her, they decide that she is the real deal, that she is, in fact, in contact with upstairs, and she's gained quite a bit of following by now, so stopping her probably would have been quite dangerous at this point. However, she is still a teenage girl, so she needs supervision. And that supervision comes in the form of Romualdo da Capua. Romualdo da Capua, from that moment on, becomes her confessor. That basically means that he's a little bit like a PR, a manager for her, okay? And he will stick by her for the rest of her life. Okay, now what makes Catherine famous? Why is she so famous still to this day? Just so you know, she's not just a saint, she's the patron saint of Italy, patron saint of Europe, and she's a doctor of the church. A doctor of the church isn't who the Pope goes to when he has a flu, okay? A doctor of the church is someone who, through their writings and basically the literature that they've left behind, have enriched the library of the church to an extent that they can become a doctor of the church. Only 4 women in history have become doctors of the church. Now, remember, she can't read or write. She learns how to read and write a little bit in later life. We have like 1 or 2 letters which were actually written by her hand, but otherwise, I mean, she can't really read or write. So how does she become a doctor of the church if she can't read or write? She dictates her letters, okay? So the letters are written by her followers and often by Romualdo di Capua while she is dictating them. You may say, so how do we know they're actually hers? Well, all her literature has been analyzed profusely, okay? She has been a subject of interest for many scholars, and you can tell that they're all coming from the same person and that they're coming from her. What does she do with these letters? Now, as I said, very important saint, very famous. What makes her different? It's not the visions. It's not the exorcism, all right? Performing miracles, having visions, and all of this stuff is pretty common for a saint, all right? You kind of have to do some magic stuff if you want to become a saint, okay? However, what makes her different is the influence on the world around her at the time, because the letters that she's writing and that she's sending out, she's sending them to the most important rulers and just important people of her time, basically telling them what to do, all right? This is a teenage girl that loves telling people what to do. Sound familiar? So even she goes into her 20s and she still loves telling people what to do. And she's right, like the most famous case of her telling people what to do is her telling the Pope what to do, okay? Now, she is living during a period of the Catholic Church, which is called the Avignon Captivity. Now, the Avignon Captivity is a time during which the papacy had been moved from Rome to Avignon. Now, it's not like in A Good Year with Russell Crowe, where the Pope goes on holiday to France and decides to stay. No, he was forcibly coerced into moving the papacy to Avignon. So basically, the French king sends a dude to pick up the Pope, give him a slap, and bring him back to Avignon. This is because if you can have sway over the Pope, if you tell the Pope what to say, then you are essentially telling all of the Catholic world what to do, all right? So by having the Pope underneath his power, he is able to have power over all of the Catholic community in Europe, which is basically everyone, right? Because everyone is Catholic in Europe at that time. All right, so but getting back to our time, during the Avignon captivity, the Pope is in Avignon. Everyone in Italy wants him to move back to Rome, all right? So she, and the Pope actually starts talking about this. He starts talking about, well, you know, I'm kind of thinking I want to move back to Italy, you know, good wine in Italy too. So she decides to send him some letters telling him, like, when are you moving back? You keep saying you're going to move back to Rome. You need to move the papacy back to Rome. And he says, now keep in mind, if Catherine sends you a letter, you can't just be like, well, jump in a lake, I don't care. You need to respond thinking that everyone is going to read that, because these are open letters, and the letters that you write back, everyone is going to have access to those. And if everyone believes that she's talking with upstairs, you kind of have to, you know, mince your words with what you're going to say back to her. So he writes back saying, well, yes, I do, you know, want to move back to Rome, but I'm a little bit worried about the intrigues there. I'm worried that, you know, I'll get killed if I move back to Rome. And she says, I kid you not, she says to the Pope, stop acting like a child and start acting like the leader of the Catholic Church. This is what she has the courage to say to the Pope. I mean, that is amazing. I love this girl. So the Pope actually finishes with moving the Catholic Church back to Rome. And so she is recognized as being the main reason why he moves the church back to Rome. Now, after he dies a few months after moving back to Rome, and at this point we have what's called the schism. Basically, we have two popes which get elected. You can't have two popes, all right? And she is writing to everyone saying which pope they should be supporting, okay? Now, just so you don't equate powerful woman with feminist, this is what she writes to the Queen of Naples. So the Queen of Naples originally supports the Pope that Catherine is supporting, but then switches popes. She switches to another Pope. And Catherine writes to her and says, stop acting like a female and start acting like a king. All right, to tell her, because she's been switching too much, as apparently females do. So she's a very strong-headed woman, very, very defiant and rebellious kind of woman, and that is how she makes history. Now, to give you an idea of how self-important she is, I think she's a bit egocentric in a good way. She actually, in her mind, she's telling God what to do. I'll tell you why. So during one of her, well, first of all, when she's younger, she still hasn't become a nun yet. She becomes a nun at 16, but she's like decided she's going to become a nun, and her parents are trying to dissuade her of this. She has a favorite sister, which is an elder sister who is called Lapa. And Lapa already has, like, I don't know how many kids. Their mum says to Lapa, why don't you try talking to Catherine? Why don't you try to convince her that she should become, you know, a regular wife like you are, and just put up, like, set up a family? So Lapa talks to Catherine and says, you know, this is a lovely life. I love having kids. I love having a husband. Like, you know, just try, okay? Give it a try. So Catherine sways from her direction and says, okay, I will give it a try. She starts, you know, making her hair nice and starts thinking about looking for a husband. Soon after this happens, Lapa dies of childbirth. And at this point, Catherine is like, God, you know, took away my sister because my sister was distracting me from my rightful path. So I must never get distracted from this again. She's thinking like everything around her is happening because of her, because of this role that God has for her. So she, at this point, she cuts off all her hair, and she's like, I am most certainly not getting married and having children. I mean, to be fair, her sister died of childbirth, so she's probably like, no way I'm having kids, right? And so she is even more decided of the way she's going to take. And at this point, she makes a pact with God. She says this in her writing. So this is the version of what happened according to Catherine. She says to God, okay, I will follow my path and I won't diverge from my path, never again. But all of my family go to heaven, okay? Straight to heaven. And all of their sins are on me. I will pay for my family's sins, all right? Deal? And apparently God's like, okay, deal. So she goes ahead, years go by, and she's a nun, and she's been, you know, doing things that nuns like Catherine do. And her dad dies at some point, and she dreams of her father that night, and her father is in purgatory. Now, for those of you who aren't acquainted, purgatory is like this mountain that you have to climb, sometimes for centuries, to make your way to heaven, all right? And Catherine goes to God and says, dude, this is not what we agreed upon. He was supposed to go straight to heaven. And God's like, yeah, but he was a merchant. He got up to all sorts. I can't send him straight to heaven. He'll get there. He's in purgatory, but straight to heaven can't do. And she's like, no. We had an agreement. He is going to heaven. I am paying for his sins. This is what we agreed upon. And God does what he's told. And the next morning she wakes up and her father is in heaven, and she has a new pain in her back, which is paying for the sins of her father. So in her mind, she is literally telling even God what to do, okay? This is Catherine. Saint Catherine is actually one of the human beings that we know most about from the 1300s. I mean, more than most men, more than most kings, we know so much about her. This is because Romualdo da Capua documents her life and writes a biography about her. He also interviewed her mother, who survived after St. Catherine's death. And so we know really a lot about her everyday life from when she was a child. This means that people studying her have had a lot to go upon. And in fact, in the 1800s, when psychoanalysis becomes a thing, people have a field trip on St. Catherine. Imagine a young teenage girl that's starving herself and having visions. I mean, that is so much to go upon. And so there's a lot of thoughts been had by various scholars about why St. Catherine did the things she did, basically. She did, however, go through a lot of pain. She did have this kind of concept that you could get closer to God by suffering. She kind of wanted to be like a female version of Jesus. So she wanted to suffer as much as possible, okay? She even had what were called stigmata. Stigmata is when you receive the wounds that Jesus received on the cross upon your body so that you can suffer like Christ. We'll talk more about this when we talk about St. Francis, because this is very interesting about the concept of stigmata during the Middle Ages. But she received stigmata, and so she suffers, and she's always putting herself through suffering. In fact, she dies by starving herself to death. Sometimes she would also not drink water. Romualdo da Capua is always trying to convince her to eat and drink and take care of herself, but she's like just putting herself through so much suffering. She would whip herself. She would wear this kind of like a garter around her leg, which would have like nails sticking into it. So she puts herself through a lot of suffering. In fact, she dies at 33, like Christ. You know how there's that, you know, what is it, the 27 Club of the musicians that all die at the same age because they all want to die at the same rocker age? I guess she's like wanting to be part of the 33 Club. And she does. So she dies at 33. She dies in Rome. And after her death, straight after her death, Romualdo da Capua, who's followed her and been next to her all her life, cuts off her head and brings her head back to Siena, where you can still see it today on show inside the Church of St. Dominic. And if you're asking yourself, like, why? What the hell is going on? This is because the cult of relics. The cult of relics is something really fascinating about the Catholic Church. We will talk a lot about it in following videos. And we will be talking about a really crazy relic in another video. So subscribe to the channel. But the cult of relics starts way before St. Catherine. It's well established when St. Catherine is alive. Romualdo da Capua knows that, and so he knows that people are going to be worshipping that head, that relic, inside the Church of St. Dominic, and that's why he brings it back to the church where she started her career. And you can go visit it to this day, in fact, but you're not allowed to take any pictures. So the only way you get to see it is to see it from life. So this is us for today. This was the incredible life of this rebellious child, which was St. Catherine. And more for next time. Have a wonderful day, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.